Today, as I said before, today is the first Sunday of the first season of a new Christian calendar. And to think about where it all begins as we begin this new year, where the starting line, the starting point for Christian journey. To figure that out is pretty important because it sets the overall tone. And this season, as mentioned before, is called Advent. And what it is an in-between time that is in between. And it's not simply a time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but it's a time between what was and what is to be, or between what has already happened and what has yet to happen. And in this in-between time, we're not just passively waiting, saying this too will pass. We're not just longing for the time when everything is fixed, but we are to live and live fully here and now with all the joys and sorrows, loving, laughing, getting tired, making mistakes, being hurt sometimes, but rejoicing the other times. Living between the incarnation of God in Jesus Christ and the promise of that return. So as we begin this new Christian year and through this month of December, we will look into where and how our spiritual journey begins. The question about where it all begins. The answer from our reading today might be simple. It begins from the ending. It begins from the ending. Today's reading is pointing to the end of time. Not the joyous reading that we expect as we await for Christmas. And it talks about the fulfillment of all that God has made redeemed. Signs in the sun, moon, and the stars. It talks about people will faint from terror, nations going against another nation. But when these things begin to take place, it says, stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. And if we are honest to ourselves, whenever we hear about the term the end time, it is some sort of a judgmental moment when everything comes to a destruction. We cannot hide that fear element that is paired up with the end time narratives. When we hear about a forest fire, when we hear about an earthquake, when we hear about a flood, when we hear about a drought, when we hear about disease spreading over a continent, when we hear about famine, we say things like, life just isn't like it used to be. Or, things seem to be getting worse than ever before. Sometimes we say, I don't know if there's anywhere that is totally safe anymore. Our community, our church, or even our homes. In fact, this portion of our reading is Jesus responding to a question his disciples asked him earlier. Here's the context of the story. After Jesus teaches them about the widow's offering we talked about last week, the widow's offering of 2 coins, they're still in that temple. And some of the disciples were commenting on how beautiful this temple was. And overhearing this, Jesus tells them, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. To this, the disciples asked a question, the question that all of our human fear is grounded upon, the existential threat that triggers the deepest anxiety in all of us, as a human race and as an individual. And we join that question that this disciple is asking. When will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to take place? When will be the end time, and how will we know? To this, Jesus responds, look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. Pay attention to how Jesus is saying this. He didn't say, as the destructionists declare about the end times, when the fig tree loses all of its leaves, you will know that winter is coming. He didn't say that. Instead, when he was describing an anticipated kingdom of God, he spoke of summer, a new life, not winter and death. We miss that subtle detail when we concentrate only on what is passing away or being torn down and being lost. What about the things in our lives that are sprouting and being built up? Yesterday morning, I woke up to this dramatic scene in our house where Noah was crying his lungs out in fear that his arm might be broken. And, spoiler alert, you saw him running down today, so it's not broken. Apparently, he was climbing the stairs up to the second floor at the house, and somehow along the process, he hurt his arm. The initial thought in my head was, if his arm is broken, he won't be able to verbally explain his pain like this. It'll be much worse. But the more challenging part about that morning was, he wouldn't let us touch it. He wouldn't let us see it. He wouldn't let us even go near his arm. He was so determined that whatever we were going to do with him will hurt him more. We told him, if you want to go see the doctor, you need to let us carry him out to the car. But he wouldn't even let us do that. And he just stayed in the bed, lying to the side, which the hurting arm was, crying and crying, eventually falling asleep like that. After 2 hours, he woke up and he remembered that he was hurt. So he started to squeeze his whining again for a while until he was hungry. And when the lunch was ready, he got up and told us with a sense of pride that he courageously fought through the pain because he was too hungry. When we are occupied with all the worries, the negative thoughts, all the things that will possibly make my life go wrong, it's all in our head. It's all in our head. We can choose to see the things that are not going in our favor. Since we're talking about Noah, if we imagine in a school situation, we can choose only to see children who aren't learning. or we can notice and affirm the children whose minds and hearts are growing, fed by so many bright and dedicated teachers and tutors. We make that choice in our heads. There are other budding leaves that are easy to overlook. We can choose to see all the problems we hear from the news. We can choose to see all the problems we see in our streets. But there are ministries for feeding the hungry, clothing the underclothed, being a shelter for those who does not have a roof over their heads. Across the world, people are cold, hungry, and dying. But communities of faith are reaching out with sustainable provisions, food sources, clean drinking water, heat, and safety. Yesterday, as I was lying down with this poor little kid who was falling asleep with his dry tears leaving a trace along his face to the pillow, I realized myself thinking, this too will pass. When he wakes up, hopefully he won't be whining like earlier. And that's not the first time I think like that. There probably will be more moments where I have to tell myself to be patient as a parent, because my focus is on raising our children to become wonderful human beings in this society when they grow up. Instead of embracing who they are right now, instead of embracing this in-between times, I find myself longing for that future when it will all be well. The days without worries, the days when our goals are all achieved, the days of perfect balance that our lives will eventually somehow figure out with experience. But as I was just looking at this angel falling asleep peacefully right before my eyes, whose warm hand was holding onto my finger, I felt that we are here now, as imperfect as we are, as broken as we are, as much pain we're going through right now, as much frustration from the unsatisfactory world around us, as much tears that is leaving the trace on our cheeks. When the Reformed theologian Jürgen Moltmann talked about his first famous book called Theology of Hope, he said, "With this book, I try to present the Christian hope no longer as such an opium of the beyond, but rather as the divine power that makes us alive in this world." So as we begin this new year, I pray that we can look carefully during this in-between time, carefully for that budding leaves of a fig tree. Whatever this in-between time might mean to you, it might be in-between time at your work or in your relationship. Whatever that in-between you are living through right now, be appreciative of that time, because it may be the 9th month in the mother's womb. It may be the 3 days in the darkest tomb, because it may be between the 2 criminals crucified on each side. let us be thankful for the life we live here and now. So welcome to Advent, a season to celebrate such signs of new life. Among the mantras of pessimism and doomsday prophecies, the Lord who will return in a glorious appearing is already bringing us signs of peace, of sustainable community, of mutual care and generous inclusion, of hope and promise, and of fulfillment. Amen.